Have you ever wondered why Sunday dinners feel so special? Maybe it's the warm aroma filling the house, the clinking of dishes, or that one recipe your grandmother always seemed to make with love. Sunday dinners aren't just about the food, they're about the memories. And those meals? They hold a certain magic, don't they? Hi, I'm Ron, a proud baby boomer born in Chicago, Illinois in 1954. Join me as we journey back to our favorite memories of growing up across the United States. When you think back to the dinners your grandmother made, you probably can still taste them, right? The crispy fried chicken, the rich stews, or maybe the comforting casseroles. Sundays weren't just about gathering around the table, they were a connection to family tradition, a feast of both food and stories passed down through generations. Chances are, you'll recognize a few of them, and maybe they'll even transport you back to those cherished Sundays. Fried chicken. Let's kick it off with a timeless classic, fried chicken. Golden, crispy, and oh so juicy. Whether it was seasoned with secret spices or a simple salt and pepper blend, there was something magical about the way Grandma's fried chicken turned out. You'd sit there, watching her dredge the chicken in flour, waiting for that first crackling sound of oil, and then the anticipation for that first bite, the one that was crispy on the outside, but so tender and juicy inside. You'd always think, I could eat this every day, but there was something about saving it for Sundays that made it even more special. Pot roast. Then there's pot roast, the ultimate slow-cooked comfort food. You'd wake up from a lazy Sunday afternoon nap to the smell of beef roasting in the oven. The pot roast was like the centerpiece of the meal, sitting there in its own gravy, surrounded by perfectly tender potatoes, carrots, and onions. You could practically see it cooking all day in Grandma's cast iron pot, simmering in all those wonderful flavors. And that gravy? Oh, don't even get me started on the gravy. Pour it over everything. Potatoes, bread, even the pot roast itself. There's something so humble yet so satisfying about a great pot roast. Meatloaf. Ah, meatloaf. I know some people turn their noses up at it, but not when Grandma was in charge. This wasn't just some loaf of meat slapped together. Her meatloaf had a richness to it, moist and tender, packed with flavor. And the glaze on top, whether it was a sweet ketchup-based glaze or a rich gravy, was always spot on. And the best part? The next day, meatloaf sandwiches. It was almost like a Sunday bonus meal. 2 dinners for the price of 1. Next, we have chicken and dumplings. This was the kind of meal that, no matter how hard the week had been, 1 spoonful would melt all your worries away. Tender chunks of chicken swimming in a rich broth, with those fluffy dumplings soaking it all in. I remember watching those dumplings puff up in the pot, waiting patiently for them to cook through. Breaking into one with your spoon and watching the steam escape was like opening a little gift at the dinner table. You knew Grandma made this dish with love. It tasted like a warm hug in a bowl. Lasagna. Now, for those of you with an Italian grandmother, or maybe just one with a serious love for Italian food, lasagna was likely a Sunday tradition. Layer upon layer of wide pasta, rich meat sauce, creamy ricotta, and melted mozzarella cheese. Each bite was a balance of textures, the soft pasta, the meaty sauce, the creamy ricotta. And let's not forget the slightly crispy edges. Those were the bites that made you sneak an extra slice. It was the kind of dish that made you feel full, not just in your stomach, but in your heart too. Roast chicken simple, yet elegant. Roast chicken wasn't just dinner, it was an event. The crispy skin, glistening with just the right amount of seasoning. The meat so juicy that you could pull it apart with a fork. And if you were lucky enough to get the drumstick, that was the prize of the meal. Roast chicken might sound like an ordinary dish, but in your grandmother's kitchen, it was anything but. The smell alone could gather the whole family around the table. Beef stew. Now we're talking about beef stew. Thick, hearty, and perfect for those cold Sundays when you just wanted to curl up inside. The kind of meal that warmed you from the inside out. Grandma would let it simmer all afternoon, the meat breaking down until it was impossibly tender, the vegetables soaking up all that flavor. And let's be real, There was nothing better than scooping out chunks of potato and dipping crusty bread into that rich, beefy broth. Macaroni and cheese. Now, you might think of mac and cheese as just a side dish, but not when Grandma made it. This wasn't your everyday mac and cheese. This was baked macaroni, the kind with a crunchy golden topping, and layer after layer of gooey, cheesy goodness. You couldn't stop at one serving, and by the time the meal was over, you'd find yourself picking at the crispy edges that were left in the dish. It was comfort food at its finest. Shepherd's pie was one of those meals that felt both humble and special at the same time. Ground meat, simmered with vegetables and gravy, then topped with a thick layer of creamy mashed potatoes. You know the best part? Getting a forkful of everything. The meat, the gravy, and the mashed potatoes in one bite. It was like every spoonful had a little bit of love baked right into it. Spaghetti and meatballs. Spaghetti and meatballs was the meal that always came with extra sauce and extra laughter. The meatballs, perfectly seasoned, slow-cooked in Grandma's secret tomato sauce recipe. And of course, there was always plenty of sauce for your garlic bread. Because who can resist soaking up that sauce? Chicken pot pie. Chicken pot pie wasn't just a meal, it was a work of art. That flaky crust, the creamy chicken and vegetable filling, the way the pie held together just long enough before breaking open to reveal the steaming goodness inside. Each bite was like a warm, savory pastry made just for you. And when Grandma made it, you knew it was going to be perfect every time. Ham with pineapple glaze. For those special Sundays, a ham with pineapple glaze would make its way to the table. The sweet, caramelized pineapple paired with the savory ham was a flavor combination that just worked. And Grandma always seemed to get it just right. Sweet, but not too sweet. You could taste the care in every bite. Baked Ziti. If lasagna was too much for a given Sunday, baked Ziti was its easier but just as delicious cousin. It was a dish that brought all the same flavors together without all the layers. Ziti pasta, rich tomato sauce, melted cheese, baked until golden and bubbling. It was always a crowd pleaser, and there was always enough for seconds. Cabbage rolls. Stuffed cabbage rolls weren't just a meal, they were an event. Grandma would roll up ground meat and rice in cabbage leaves, then simmer them in a rich tomato sauce. It was a slow cooking process, but the payoff? Completely worth it. Each bite had a perfect balance of savory, tender meat, and the slight bite of the cabbage. Barbecue ribs. On a summer Sunday, you might remember Grandma firing up the grill and slow cooking some barbecue ribs. The sticky, tangy sauce, the smoky flavor, and that melt-in-your-mouth tenderness. It didn't matter how messy you got. Licking your fingers clean was half the fun. Chicken cacciatore. Chicken cacciatore was a dish that brought everyone together. The chicken, braised in a rich tomato sauce with peppers, onions, and herbs, was rustic, hearty, and full of flavor. It was the kind of meal that felt like a celebration, even if it was just a regular Sunday. Green bean casserole. Even if it wasn't the main star, green bean casserole was always a solid supporting act. Creamy, crunchy, and full of flavor, especially with those crispy onions on top. It was the side dish that could easily steal the show. Collard greens with ham hocks. If your grandmother came from the South, collard greens with ham hocks were a must. They were slow cooked to perfection, with the smoky flavor from the ham hocks working its way through every bite. It was soul food, plain and simple. Beef stroganoff creamy, indulgent beef stroganoff with tender strips of beef, rich sour cream sauce, and noodles. It was one of those meals that felt a little fancy, but it was still comforting in every way. One bite of that rich, creamy sauce, and you were hooked. Pork roast with apples. Finally, we come to pork roast with apples. The sweet and savory combination of roasted pork with caramelized apples was something special. The apples added just enough sweetness to balance the savory pork, making each bite feel like a little celebration. These Sunday dinners weren't just about the food, they were about love, tradition, and the joy of being together. Each dish tells a story, one that's filled with warmth, laughter, and memories of your grandmother's kitchen. So, which one of these meals takes you back to those Sunday gatherings? Is there one you're gonna try and recreate? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.